recording and we can start the session already. Sorry, Gustavo, for the bit delay that we had, but you have the floor again, please. And if anyone have a question and or a comment from the last part, please raise your hand, leave on the chat, and we can proceed. Please, Gustavo. Gustavo, you're muted. We're not listening to you. No, we're not listening, Gustavo. You're muted. Not yet. No, we are seeing.
Okay, here we are.
Okay, yeah. Now we are seeing a big Victor on the screen, but we are not. Yeah, now we can see the presentation.
Okay.
Perfect. No, it's not full screen yet, but.
Okay, not for me either.
Perfect.
Is it full screen now?
Yes.
Okay. No, here I have some more up-to-date data, but it's not a big difference. Just in blue, you have the share of NEET in the country, while in white, you have how recent are the data. If the bar is very high, means 2023. If the bar is small, means previous year. When the bar is very small, means that the data are very old. So you can trust them less. They are less reliable. We see that this problem is in some countries very widespread and can be a source of troubles for everybody. Well, not only it is important to know who is employed, who is unemployed, and who is non-participant, is also important can be very also interesting to understand the flows between these groups. For example, we know that many people become employed not from being unemployed, but from being non-participant. What does it mean? Means that they were not job seeking, but in reality, they were willing to have a job. And then maybe what happens? Happens that I apply in a company today and they refuse, they don't employ me. But 1 year, I authorize them to keep my data, or the law authorizes them to keep my data. So they have my data. 1 year later, when I already stopped job seeking, they call me. And I am very willing to go, and I go to work. So we have many people who become employed from the group of non-participants. By the same token, we have group people who become abandon the condition of unemployed and become non-participant, because maybe they lose the hope of finding a job, or because they should take care of somebody in their family. So then we have also people who are employed and find another job and become again employed, but in another place. That is that line which goes from employed to employed. So there are many different situations. And these different situations, when you have the figures about these, become interesting to understand what's really happening. Because, for example, the fact that in a country like Italy, maybe 1 million people in 1 year get a job from the non-participant means that then among the non-participants, there are many people who are willing to work. And therefore, the consideration of this group can be different. So, for example, also for a company, it can be interesting to know that they can be reached. And it doesn't matter that they are not job seeking now. Maybe they are willing to work. And by the same token, when we speak about unemployment, maybe we underestimate unemployment. because we don't consider all the non-participants which would like to work. Some countries even provide the statistics of the number of non-participants which actually would like to work. Yes, I told you what is the labor force. The labor force is the sum of the unemployed plus the employed. We can look at the ratio between the labor force and the working age population, and we have an idea of participation to the labor market. Why is it important to know the participation to the labor market, the participation rate? I give you an example. We have a country where there are 10 people in working age, okay? 10 people in working age. And in this 10 people in working age, you have 3 who are unemployed, 7 which are employed, and no one is non-participant, okay? You have 10 people, 7 have a job, 3 don't have a job, but are unemployed. And there are no non-participants. So how much is the unemployment rate in this country? The unemployment rate is given by the number of the unemployed divided the labor force. So how many unemployed do we have in this country? Tell me. 3. We have 3 unemployed. What is the labor force? 10. 10 people in the labor force. So how much is the unemployment rate in this country?
We got 30% messages already on the chat. Gustavo?
Okay, 30%. We have an unemployment rate at 30%. Now it happens this, that among the 3 which are unemployed, 2 are convinced that they will never get a job. 2 before, what was the labor force, the participation rate before? Before, the participation rate was 100%. Everybody was participating because we had a labor force of 10 in a working age population of 10. So the participation rate, activity rate was 100%. Everybody was participating. And the unemployment rate was 30%. Now imagine that 2 of the 3 unemployed decide that they have no hope, that there is no job for them. They have sent a lot of applications and they decide to stop job seeking. So they go outside the labor force. Now let's calculate the new unemployment rate. The labor force now is given by 7 who have a job, 1 who is still job seeking, so they are 8 in the labor force. And the unemployment rate is the number of the unemployed, 1 divided 8. Okay? So 1 divided 8 means, what is 12%? Something like that. So the unemployment rate before was 30%. The unemployment rate before was 30%. Now is only 12%. Did the situation in the country improve? The government will make big announcements saying, or also the trade union, the employers, everybody will say, we have improved the situation with our new agreements. The unemployment rate, which was 30%, now is only 12%. But are people living better today?
No.
No. We have 1 person who is job seeking, 2 persons who are so desperate which they stopped job seeking. So at the end of the day, we have 7 people working as before. But the participation rate which before was 100%, now is only 80%. And therefore, the lower unemployment rate does not mean anything. If you look at the unemployment rate without looking at the participation rate, you do not understand anything. You do not have a perception of what's going on in the labor market. So you think that the policy was right, that companies are creating a lot of jobs, that the trade unions were very responsible, that whatever. In reality, there was no improvement. So for this reason, when you look at the unemployment rate, please look always at the participation rate as well. If you don't look at the participation rate and the activity rate, which is the same thing, you get a wrong view of the labor market. And here we have the labor force participation. Again, here there is the usual problem that these statistics of the World Bank are based on the population with more than 15 years. And since in Italy or other countries, there are a lot of people who are old, these statistics shrink too much the labor force participation. The right way to measure it should be based on the working age population, not on only those older than 15. In countries where there are few old people, the problem doesn't exist. But in countries where there is a lot of old people, the problem is very big. So for example, here you see the very low participation in Italy, but is a little bit biased this, because forgets that in Italy many people are simply old. But for example, in India, the participation is rather low, but not because they are many people, because they have many old people. Why in India the labor force participation is low? Some Indian colleague or somebody else wants try to suggest a possibility.
Professor, I think that this participation rate may be because India is still largely a agricultural society, and 50% of our GDP comes from, if I am not wrong, from it's 33% of GDP is from agricultural labor. So because of that, this participation is low. But we are very young economy right now. The government for last 10 years through their various reports claiming demographic dividend, because we are having a most we are youngest population, along with the escalating one, not that high. But I don't know how this labor force participation is less, because when the 90, see, one thing that can be said with a reservation is that our statistical system may not be that accurate to present it, because our economy is mostly in informal sector. Yes, Professor, please go ahead. Tell me.
From my point of view, according to the data that I have seen, there is a low female participation to the labor force. It's a gender issue. There is in India, but also Pakistan, there is a low participation of women to the labor force.
Professor, this I have no academic approach to this problem, but I can say that whether we are counting rural women working on fields in these data, because they are largely employed in agricultural fields also. So whether these data are taking those involvement.
Okay, that's for agriculture. But you say that agriculture is 30%. What about the remaining 70%?
Sorry, Rohit. No, you can continue, Rohit, and then we go to Ankar, please.
No, Omkar can go ahead. Please, Omkar.
Okay, thank you, Rohit. So, I just wanted to add to the same thing that Rohit said that, a lot of our, informal sector labels are there which are not in the radar of these statics. And women workforce, though right now the government of India is, trying to put them on a lot of other places where only male people were working, let's say, like line of the, major manufacturing units. So on those lines also women workforce is included. And then the night shifts have been eases for the women persons. For it was only male who used to work during the night shifts. However, right now after prior permission from the labor department, women can participate in the night shifts too, with all the precautions and rules and regulations that are being followed. So I think the informal sector is a major contribution in this that do not add to the stats that we are looking in. So that's why the labor participation is lower in India.
Okay. Okay. Here are statistics, not very well, they are just updated to some years ago. But for example, in Brazil, there was a decrease between 2000, in the early 2000 till 2016. And this was due in part to an improvement of conditions, because in families, sometimes people who consider that students are not participating to the labor force. So if you are above 15 and in the past you were obliged to work because your family could not survive if you were not working, and then the condition of your family improves a little bit, maybe you can still keep on studying. And this is something which probably happened in Brazil in the first at the beginning of the between 2005 and 2016. So there was no less pressure to be all participants. We also observe in China there was a decrease in participation, always starting from very high level. Still China has very high level, but this very high level had some decrease. But this is also an indicator of welfare, because when participation is too high, is also an indicator that nobody can afford not to work. So that cannot be. We want societies where many people work, but if everybody must work, can be an indicator of problems, because somebody in a country where there are margins, where there is wealth, somebody may decide not to work, maybe to study, maybe to improve the other things. Well, in India, we observed in those years there was some decrease also, but I repeat, this not necessarily is a bad indicator. In Italy, look at what happened in 2011-12. Suddenly the participation jumped up. And this was due to a retirement reform, a reform of the pension system. Well, in South Africa, I cannot say specific things. In Switzerland, they made an effort probably to increase the participation. United States is decreasing. So when we look at the data about employment in the United States, about unemployment in the United States, you should not forget that the participation was also decreasing. At world level, the trend is towards a decrease, because in a rural environment, everybody is working. In a rural environment, there is nobody who is not working. In the rural environment, it's common that many people work. When the rural population shrinks, it's not strange that the labor participation goes down as well. Oh, now I can finally speak about the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate is given by the number of those who are unemployed divided the labor force. So before, in our example, at the beginning, our unemployment rate was 3 divided 10, and later on became 1 divided 8. So our unemployment rate diminished, but it diminished not because more people got a job, but it diminished because some of those unemployed went outside the labor force. This is a map of Europe. I always have it easy to get and with by regions. As you see, unemployment in 2020 was mostly a problem in Southern Europe, mostly in Southern Europe. If we look at our countries, we have a very strange picture. We see that the unemployment rate does not mean too much. Because would you say that the situation, the labor market situation, is very similar in Malawi, Congo Democratic Republic, Japan, and Mexico? Would you say this? Or would you say that in Chile and Zimbabwe, the labor market is similar? What are your opinion on the chat?
Anyone want to comment on the visual graph?
The blue lines means the unemployment rate, and the white lines means the year when the data were collected, 24, 20, 16. When the line is very small, means that the data are a little bit old. So can we say the unemployment rate is more or less the same in the Democratic Republic of Congo and in Japan? So we can say that the labor market is more or less the same in the Democratic Republic of Congo or Japan. Do you agree?
People are saying no. I'm seeing Rohit
And the answer is no.
The Japan similar to India.
The answer is, the correct answer is no. The unemployment rate means very little for several reasons. First, you should tell me about the participation rate. And okay, we could go and have a look at the participation rate in Japan and in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That is a first problem. I don't find it. Japan is, the participation rate is rather high. Democratic, no, I don't have the data of the Democratic Republic of Congo. That is already an issue that we don't have the data. But so, first problem, the participation rate. Second problem, what about informal labor? How many of those who in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Japan, almost everybody who is employed is formally employed. So in Japan, they are not unemployed because they have a formal employment. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, I suspect, but if there is somebody from the Democratic Republic of Congo, they can correct me, that there is no unemployment because a lot of people have informal jobs. Am I wrong?
I don't know if Mihail want to add something, because no, she did not. Stefan
or in chat, you can
yes.
speak in chat if you don't want.
Stefan is from Kenya. He's mentioning that yes to your question.
Yes.
Sorry, Stephen.
Yes.
You can go on.
Yes.
Then we go to Akil, please. You can go on, Stephen. Sorry.
Yes. The situation mostly in most of African countries, and Kenya included, is that the the unemployment rate is very low, but majority of the people who are considered in employment, they're in the informal sector. For example, in Kenya, those who are in employment, 85% of them are in the informal sector. Only 15 or thereabout are in the formal sector.
Kenya has the same unemployment rate as the European Union, more or less. But the situations are different.
Akil, I saw that you had your hand raised before. You want to add?
Professor, I was just wondering if the population, the aging of the population, I always recall Japan to be a country that has always been one with an aging population. And I also remember that earlier on you mentioned something about the Democratic Republic of Congo having a much younger population, and not necessarily an aging population. So I was wondering if those things could influence what we're speaking about now.
Well, yeah. Well, it is true that Congo has a young population, Japan an old population. This is true. But at the end of the day, you see that their unemployment rates are more or less the same. But this means, anyway, very little, because the unemployment rate shows very little. If you don't know a lot of other things, for example, the informality, in Congo, a lot of people work because they have informal positions. And not only, those which are not informal maybe are outside the labor force. Another group, non-participating. Because if you have a high non-participation, then you have lower unemployment rate. So, and for example, you find situation like, well, France and Kenya, or France and which are Chile and Zimbabwe have a similar unemployment rate. But I think the situations are very different. The problem is that the unemployment rate alone means very little. This is the message that I want to leave with you, because sometimes social partners discuss about the unemployment rate, but the unemployment rate alone means very little if it is not taken together with the degree of informality and the labor force participation. If you don't tell me what is the percentage of informal economy and informal labor, if you don't tell me what is the participation rate, the unemployment rate doesn't make any sense.
So, Professor,
Yeah.
I guess we have to consider active participation, right? We must consider in the countries if there are persons that are actively seeking employment and are unable to find employment to determine the unemployment rate. So, is it that we could use it as a guide to say, to some extent, I know we have to compare it along with the participation rate, but we'll obviously have to look at it as a reflection of persons also not actively looking for work?
No, but if you are already working in an informal setting, you don't need to look for a job. You are selling 3 lemons on the street, or you are driving a bike taxi, or you are doing some hours of work in the construction, then you receive a little bit of cash. You are informally employed, and therefore you cannot be unemployed and you are not job seeking.
Understood. Thank you, Prof.
Okay. So the problems with the interpretation of the unemployment rate, there is the issue of inactivity versus unemployment. Remember, when people stop being unemployed because they become inactive, that is not a big advantage. Then there is the definition of employment. Maybe you worked only 1 hour last week and you already become employed. So you do a little bit of gardening for your neighbor and you become employed. And then usually we have more unemployed people where there is a social security system. If you look back at the picture, where one of the countries which has more unemployed people is South Africa. But not because the situation of South Africa is worse than many other African countries. For example, I don't think that the labor market in South Africa is worse than in the Democratic Republic of Congo. What is the big difference? Is that in South Africa, there is a significant unemployment benefit. So in South Africa, being unemployed gives you some rights. I'm not sure that in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you have equivalent benefits to South Africa. Am I wrong?
Correct, Professor. We don't have.
Okay. So you find that in those countries where the welfare system is more protective, then you may have more unemployment. But that is not an effect, because in other countries simply is impossible to be unemployed. Oh, sorry. So where social security system exists, then and it works, it is more likely to find unemployed people. But besides, maybe you are employed, but you are under, there is the issue of underutilization. Let's see what happens. Besides the unemployed, we have other people who are underutilized. We have the time-related underemployment. For example, I would like to work 30 or 40 hours per week, but I can only work 10 hours per week. So I am time-related underemployed. I would like to work more, but I cannot. I don't find the opportunities to work. So I am underemployed for time relation. Or I am a working poor, which means that I work, but I earn less than 60% of the median worker in my country. I earn less than 60% of the median worker in my country, where I remind you the median worker is that person who earns more than 50% of other people and less than 50% of other people. So he's in between. Is the worker, the median worker is the one which has half of the population earning more than he or she, and half of the population earning less than he or she. Then we said already that there are people who are not in the labor force because they are discouraged. And then there are also those who are job seeking, but they are job seeking but they in reality, for some reason, would not take the job if a job were offered. These are a special category. So if you look together all these things, you find that the labor underutilization is given by time-related underemployed, unemployed, and potential labor force, which is given by the seeking not available and the available but not seeking. So this gives you how many people in reality could work more.
Gustavo, sorry,
Yep.
we have Javier with the hand raised.
Please, Javier.
Thank you, Victor, Gustavo. You just touched on a very interesting topic we have been discussing the last couple of years in Chile, which I wanted to call out, and maybe this it could be also relevant for other countries. That is the weekly shift reduction by regulation. In 2 years ago, Chile approved a reduction for 45-hour weekly hour shift to a 40-hour, probably implemented across 5 years. So we are moving every 2 years. We're reducing 2 hours, 2 hours. And there has been a lot of discussion about whether a shorter shift translates either into higher productivity, because it's supposed to produce the same in less hours. I don't know how that works, but someone thinks that is magic and is supposed to work. But at the same time, if people work less hours, that also means that there's unemployment, because people could be working and they are not working. I'm not talking about the complete time. I'm just talking about an hour, for example. There's half an hour or an hour that people were used to work and they are not working today. Other people say that will create new jobs. More people will need to fill that time, which in some cases is real when you have continuous shifts, that when machines cannot stop. That's what happened in mining, for example. But in other places, mostly in retail, for example, I have seen they have reduced their shifts. At the time that the stores open is less. So in fact, they are producing less money. They are selling less and they are producing less work.
Well, that could be. I always remember that in Switzerland, on Sunday, you don't find any shop open, but restaurant and sweet shops, things. So it depends. Maybe the shopping is concentrated more. It could be. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So which is the question then is, in your perspective, Professor, does a reduced shift translate into higher productivity or lower productivity, into higher employment or lower employment?
Well, it's difficult. There is a problem of causality. So if it is difficult to decide where first arrived the egg or first the chicken, because there is a relation between chickens and eggs, but it's difficult to decide when you have first the chicken. We know that usually most of countries with few working hours often, not always, but often have high productivity. Take, for example, Germany. In Europe, for example, countries with low, Germany, in Northern Europe in particular, they have few working hours and the productivity is high enough. So that now the other issue is to say why it is high enough. So that the question is, are they productive because they work few hours, or they work few hours because they are productive? That is the big problem to clarify. We know that many countries where they work few hours, they are productive. But what we have better to understand, and I should better study before giving an answer, is if they are productive because they work few hours, or if they work few hours because they are productive. That is another part of the story. What happened in France, reducing the working hours, is that people increased many activities of the free time. And there was the creation of jobs in all those people who were working for example, gyms, but also a lot of other things, which were many activities of the free time, even tourism, because some people, for example, could concentrate their hours on 4 days. So I work 4 days, but I have a weekend of 3 days. But this means that more people started traveling. and started traveling, because with 3 days you can already go. There were different phenomena. One was, for example, that many people started spending more time in the peripheral regions. So maybe I have a job in the capital, but I work 4 days in the capital, and then I can spend 3 days in a peripheral region. And this, of course, in the peripheral region, I maybe spend, okay, I have a travel to do, to pay. But then in the peripheral region, maybe I spend less. But for the peripheral region, my money can be very precious, and they can develop some business that before they didn't have. So it's very complicated, the story. I cannot tell you a final word this brings or doesn't bring. We know that countries with short working hours usually have high productivity. The reason for this is a different story. Maybe the reason is another one. So I cannot say they are productive because they work few hours. But I cannot exclude it, but I cannot say a final word on this. I should, probably there is some literature on the topic, but I didn't review that. So I don't want to express a word without grounding it on studies. Yeah.
No, you can continue, Gustavo, if anyone have a question.
Okay, I do. We don't have too much, but we. Okay, so here we have some data from ILOstat, which is the statistical branch of the ILO, about forms of underutilization, where you have unemployment rate, which is called the so-called LU1. That is simply the unemployment rate. Then LU2 is the combined rate of time-related underemployment, so those who would like to work more hours and work fewer hours, plus the unemployment. So this is LU2. Basically, the forced part-time. LU2 is the sum of unemployment plus forced part-time. LU3 is the combined rate of unemployment and the potential labor force. So the potential labor force means those who are not job seeking but are available to work, and those who are job seeking and are not available to work. LU4 is the total underutilization, labor underutilization. The year of reference are different from country to country because we don't have data for every country in the same year. And here we find Costa Rica. Well, in Costa Rica, we have an LU1, which is at around 11%. So the unemployment rate is 11%. But when you add those who work fewer hours that they want, we reach 19%. And when we add the unemployment rate plus those who are non-active but are ready to work or are job seeking, non-active but are job seeking but ready to are job seeking but not ready to work, basically, we go to a bigger number of 17%. And 22% is the total underutilization. So we see that I would say that in many countries, a big part of underutilization comes Well, no, there are some in Ethiopia, much of the underutilization comes from the fact that people don't work all the hours that they would like to work. Here we have some other countries. Chile. Well, look at Chile. Chile, we have 8.3% was given unemployment rate in that year, but it becomes 14%, including those who are obliged to work, who would like to work 40 hours and cannot. Then, okay, the total underutilization in Chile was estimated around 20%, more or less like in Italy. Afghanistan, Tunisia, Tonga, France, Uruguay, Tanzania, Peru, Bosnia, Finland, Lebanon, Colombia, Tuvalu, Sweden, Paraguay, Montserrat, Iran, Nigeria, Barbados, Serbia, Cyprus, Portugal, Panama, Indonesia, Dominican Republic, Ireland, Croatia, Belgium, Philippines, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Maldives, Latvia, UK, Bolivia, Switzerland, Estonia, Brunei, Korea, Norway, Iceland, Sri Lanka, Mongolia, Denmark, Uganda, Lithuania, New Zealand, Romania, Slovenia, Singapore, Pakistan, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Kazakhstan. In Kazakhstan, there is an unemployment rate around 5%, and then a little bit more, including the other groups. Okay. There is, here we have Congo, but in Congo, everything low. I think that the big player is the informal economy here. Ecuador, Egypt, Australia, Argentina, Cambodia, Myanmar, Vietnam, United States, everything rather low. Kenya, well, the underutilization is almost double the unemployment rate. And still, we are not touching the informal. St. Lucia, there is an unemployment rate rather high, which becomes a little bit more with the other ones. In Mexico, we have only data about the unemployment rate. Malawi, very low. Trinidad and Tobago, only data about unemployment. Okay. Time-related underemployment by sex and age is provided by the ILO. But there is a lot of uncertainty about this data. Persons in time-related underemployment comprise all persons in employment who satisfy the following three criteria: are willing to work additional hours, are available to work additional hours, and work less than a threshold relating to working time. So we don't put about among the underemployed those who already work 40 hours. Usually there is a threshold which is lower. You are underemployed when you don't work 10, 15 hours, something like that. The series is part of the ILO model estimates and is harmonized to account for difference in national data and scope of coverage. So you can go to the website of ILOstat to have better information. And here we have some data about this underemployment. Okay, but we can go ahead. Oh, here is interesting because we see a difference by regions. We have South Africa. In South Africa, the big player is unemployment more than time-related underemployment. In the Americas, well, if we look, well, this is more a proportion since all this data give 100. So this is the shares of the underutilization, not the actual underutilization. Okay. I still would like, okay, we have data about Europe, European countries. In Italy, the weight of unemployment is relatively low. There are other phenomena like non-participation, which play a certain role. These are all data of 2011, so are rather old. In that moment in Italy, there was not much a problem of underutilization. But in Chile, on the other side, they speak about, in that moment, there was an issue of time-related underemployment. So people who would like to work more, but could not go above a threshold, a given threshold. Okay, we have underemployed part-time workers in some countries. For example, the Netherlands, the phenomenon is important. The Netherlands has not a very high unemployment, but part-time workers who are in some way underemployed play some role. Also Switzerland, in a context of low unemployment, there is and underemployment time dependent. So the underemployment is of two natures, or is of different nature. No, it's of two natures, sorry. It's on two natures. One is the time-related underemployment. So I would like to work above a minimum threshold of 10, 15, 20 hours, but I cannot. So this is time-related underemployment. But there is also another aspect to take into account, which are the inadequate employment situations with inadequate use of capacities. And this argument is very important also in terms of productivity. Imagine we have countries where there are engineers. Well, in Italy, we have many people who work collecting rubbish and they have a degree. They have a degree and they collect rubbish. These are forms of underutilization of capacities. When you use an engineer or a doctor or a chemist or somebody or a potential teacher to do mentions which require much lower skills, you are using capacities in an inadequate way. You could tell me, oh, well, at the end of the day, that's only a problem of that person. That person should be happy that anyway he or she can work. So even if he is an engineer and has to wash dishes, okay, at least he has a job. What do you think about this? And there is another question which I want to put you. Should we encourage people with qualifications to accept any job? Yes or no?
Stephen, please go ahead, and anyone else feel free to comment that. Use the chat as well. But Stephen, please.
Where you have inadequate use of capacities, I think is a situation that is not desirable because we invest a lot someone invests a lot in perhaps to become an engineer, and if that skill is not used into productive use, and where now they're doing jobs that perhaps do not even require that level of skill, they're washing dishes and all that, that is a waste of the capital that is there. Now, should people who have perhaps higher capacities accept lower jobs? In the ideal situation, they should not be able to accept, but perhaps they are pushed by necessities. They need to pay the bills and all that, but they should not accept.
Okay, so this is your position. Let's listen if there are other positions and any other opinion on the topic. Because, for example, you understand that this implies the unemployment benefit. The unemployment benefit may allow somebody who has a mismatch, so who has qualification and doesn't want to wash dishes, may facilitate for a while to refuse to accept to wash dishes. So is this desirable or not?
Gustavo, Mihail in the chat mentioned that in Congo, they have qualified people who can't find jobs and take underqualified employment. So we have this comment, and please, anyone, if you want to add about the situation in your country, feel free to do it so. Magresha from South Africa mentioned, I do agree, but if there is nothing else that is in our line of study, you should participate in the economy in another way.
I see, okay.
Thank you, Magresha. And thank you, Mihail. Rohit, please.
Yes, Professor, I would like to add that there is a very interesting phenomena in India regarding this underemployment. In India, government jobs, the public sector and employment is considered to be very safe and secure, and something that involves, lifetime contract with the government. So you will usually find that very highly skilled people, technical people from Indian Institute of Technology or such prestigious institution, they opt for very low skilled jobs, low esteemed jobs if it comes under the government. So this kind of phenomena is very interesting. Only for the job security, they will try. For example, if someone is a BTech, bachelor's in technology, he will opt for a file assistant that is equivalent in India, who is responsible for handling the files only. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. If you find that there's a considerable percentage of youth employment is underemployed by choice, and only choosing job security over any substantial contribution to economy.
Yes, that's true. That's interesting. All these points are interesting. Any other comment? Anybody else wants to take the floor?
I don't see any more comments on chat as well. Gustavo,
okay, because we had one opinion was we should use at best the available knowledges. Somebody was saying, yes, but if in my country there are no alternatives, at the end you take what is available. Then the third was, in order to have job security, people end up in not using fully their skills. On this last point, it is interesting because if these people are so qualified, why are they not offered more stable positions with the right qualifications? Which it's the question which we could raise. I have this situation in Italy that since I contribute in some way to the university system, sometimes I hear some employers who tell, well, the educational system does not train the right people for work. So then they remain unemployed or they refuse to accept the jobs, and we should eventually not to provide too much unemployment benefit because, or not at all, because so we need in summer people who works on the beaches, who works in restaurants, who works in hotels, and it is better to push them to accept these jobs. And the educational system doesn't work well because prepares them for these things, for other things, which are not the things that we need to do. So the educational system is failing the economy. But then what happens? That some of these young people, 40% of the young people, 40, leaves the country. And many of them in other countries, maybe in Northern Europe, they get very well paid salaries. So the question is that they have some skills, and those skills in another environment can provide good rewards. So, and by the same token, the country spends money to train people who actually do not contribute to the national economy, but go to contribute to other economies. So it's a big waste. And this happens, I know, also in other countries. The brain drain. And so probably what we should aim is to reward competence, reward skills proportionally. So if you have good skills, you should be well paid. And if you have lower skills, you should be less paid. And maybe this is a way to keep the skills. In recent years, for example, there are also the policies that a country carries out have implications. For example, after COVID, in Italy, the economy was in big crisis because the COVID had blocked the economy a lot. So what was the choice? The choice was to facilitate the reconstruction and the improvement of buildings, which is something useful. I don't say that it's useless, it's useful. But who does work mostly in the reconstruction of buildings? Very few engineers and architects, and very many manual workers. So that policy, at the end of the day, was very good for manual workers. But for scientific people with high technological knowledge, was not a big help. And they kept on emigrating. So when we do a public policy, we should also reflect this public policy, who is going to support? And if we must have emigration, if somebody should leave our country, who should leave our country? Do we want that those who leave our country are the most educated? Or if somebody should leave our country, should be the least educated? Because, of course, there are consequences. Those with high education can usually increase productivity more than those with low education. But if you create a lot of jobs in the low productivity sector, and even government spends money in the low productivity sector, then you attract the low productivity workers. But then don't be surprised if your country has low productivity. And where there are low productivity, there are low wages by necessity. Here we have some data about the so-called over-education. So people who have an education which is not required by their type of job. And we find that this phenomenon, male, female, and total, rather common in Russia, Ukraine, Cyprus, somehow in Britain, not very common in Luxembourg, but also Albania, Portugal, Switzerland. They say that even in Italy it's not very common. I'm surprised. Okay. Probably because they have already emigrated. Okay, that's true. In Italy, the over-educated very often emigrate and go earning somewhere else. Okay, here we have additional data about some countries, among them Kazakhstan. Here are data about Canada, the employed, the unemployed, the not in the labor force. And so we have the whole working age population, how is moving in Canada. So there was a boom. Okay, this was with COVID. These are the data concerning COVID. In COVID, COVID brought to Canada an explosion of those working fewer hours than normal. That was the COVID effect in Canada. And also those who were outside the labor work but wanted to work. And then also some unemployed. So this is an analysis of COVID effects in Canada. Here are other data. Here we have in different groups, in different professions, the underutilization according to professional. So in the field of food preparation and serving, we have people who are, these are people often, many don't have a very high skills, but also, and here we find many underemployed or unemployed. So you see where the skills are low, the required skills are lower, you find more underemployed and unemployed. These probably are United States data, I think. Then this is not only, because there is not only the underemployment. There are the so-called inadequate employment situations where people are willing to change their work situation and they would like to change place, to change activity. What are the reasons? Well, one reason can be the inadequate use or mismatch of occupational skills. It's the case of the underutilization because you are an engineer and you wash dishes. You are too poorly paid. You have a job, but you are paid. Well, in Italy, we have a phenomenon of many young people who are employed, but they live with their parents because living not with their parents would make them too poor. And this is also one of the reasons why they don't marry and they don't have children. The opposite can be, well, the opposite. There are other situations where you have a job, but the job requires to work very many hours. For example, 50, 60 hours. I knew about some bankers, very well paid, but where the standard, for example, at the City of London, is maybe that they have to work 60 hours per week. So some of them say, yes, I have a job, I am well paid, but in reality, this is not something which I can do for a lot of time. Because 60 hours for me, I don't have a life, basically. When I work 60 hours means many hours every day. At the end, they say, we don't have a life. Then there is the issue that maybe you have the right number of hours, you are not too, your payment is okay, is normal, but your job is precarious. So how can you plan a life if your job is precarious? For example, how can you decide to have children if you don't have any certainty about your future? So you have a job now, but maybe not tomorrow. If you have children, they have this, they want to eat every day. So that can be another inadequate employment situation. But then there is the situation of very changing schedule. This week you work 5 hours, next week 60 hours, the next week 10 hours, then another week 15 hours, then another week 40 hours. So there is a big change in the number of hours. It's very difficult to organize a life when your employment is very irregular. It's very difficult to arrange any type of activity. So, for example, your family duties or your anything else is difficult when your schedule is very irregular. We already mentioned the working poor. The working poor is the person who earns less than 60% of the median worker. And then there is all the topic of informality. We could speak with long time about informality, but of course, informality, you are employed, but you do not have a contract, you are no social insurance, okay, you don't pay taxes, so there is all this field. Then there is informality of business and informality of employment. Informality of business is a business which is not registered, does not pay taxes, and does not pay social contribution. But I could be an informal worker in a formal company. So my company is formal. They have 10 formal employees and 20 informal employees. Or I am formally employed 5 hours a day, but in reality I work 8 hours or 10 hours a day, and the other hours are paid just in cash. So I am covered by Social Security for 5 hours, even if I work full time. Okay, I will skip some of these things. Yes, here we have many working poors in Burundi, Somalia, Congo, Madagascar, Malawi, many countries. These are countries with many working poor. People who are working, but basically cannot pay for basic needs, their basic needs of those of their family. And here we have other data. No working poor in Hong Kong, apparently. Okay. Very few in Costa Rica. Okay, here we have people, share of employment by economic class in 2019, with lowest economic class based on the World Bank International Poverty Line of 190. So countries where there are people working but are poor. Well, before finishing, I want to speak about equal opportunities. We have 9 minutes. I can deal with this. There are indicators of equal opportunity. So if we want to understand the labor market in a gender, in terms of gender, of sexes, first of all, there are jobs where a disproportionate quantity of people are men. And there are jobs where a disproportionate number of people are female. Therefore, when I speak about these categories, in reality, I'm not only speaking about a category or a profession, but I am speaking about a sex, women or men. So, for example, in my country, the majority of teachers are women. So when you speak about teachers in Italy, and you say that teachers have a low salary, you are saying that women have a low salary, because the segregation of women in that category is very elevated. So it's very important to understand when we analyze a group, also what does it mean then in terms of sex or gender. Then we could also look, so this is the first indicator, occupational segregation by sex. The second indicator, which is interesting, is to look at how many women are in the top professions, legislators, senior officials, corporate managers. This is another indicator which tells you how much the leadership involves women. Then there is a third indicator which we shall consider a little bit better, which is the gender wage gap. So basically, this is something we should analyze a little bit better. The percentage of gap between male and female average monthly earning or wages. And then we can look at the minimum wage as a share of the median wage by sex. I would concentrate my attention on the gender labor income gap. This gap can be measured in two ways, well, in many ways, but at least in two ways. One refers to the absolute gap. So I consider the salary of women, the average salary of women, I compare it with the average salary of men, and I make a ratio. This is the gender labor income gap. This is affected by the fact that very often women work fewer hours than men. Why? Why do women very often work fewer hours than men?
Family responsibilities.
Family responsibility. Often, not always, but often that is the reason. So if we want to take into account this, the gap becomes smaller. Let's have a look. So in pink, you have the absolute gap, which can be very big. In Finland is 21, in Korea is 61, it's a lot. In green, you have the full-time equivalent. So you say, if the woman were working full-time, the gap would be so much. So for example, you have the example of Greece, where the gap is 49%. But if women were working full-time, it would be very, very small. But of course, this is not the last word, because, of course, this is an effect of the family burden, of the distribution of the family burden in many cases. Since the family burden distributions may affect this. Then there are also other stories. The story is more complicated than this. For example, in order to give birth, women remain outside the labor force for certain periods. And therefore, they do less career. Their career is shorter because they have period in maternity. And the period in maternity does not improve their career opportunities, or normally does not. So this complicates even further things. So these things deserve some attention. Here is the gender wage gap in some countries. These are mostly, this is about the self-employed in some European countries. Well, apparently in Estonia and France, it's profitable to be self-employed for a woman. Earns even more. Well, that's a strange story. Eh? Full-time gender wage gap in different countries, but these are more. No, we have also Colombia, Chile, Chile is 8%, 9%. United States 16.9. Okay. Okay, more or less this is what I wanted to tell you, but I'm ready to listen to your questions and comments, please.
Thank you, Gustavo. So who wants to go first to ask a question, a comment? Okay. I don't know if any, we have some interesting discussions in the chat, Gustavo.
Okay.
Not any questions, but a lot of comments during your presentation. Like, I would recommend you to take a look on that after. But let's wait before to see if anyone have a question. Let's open the floor. Please raise your hand if you have any. Use the chat if you prefer. I don't think there are any more questions, Gustavo. Maybe our students are a bit shy because of the time. We are already in the end of it. Maybe they are digesting because we have a lot of food for thought since this last information that you gave us. I think that the last part specifically, Gustavo, about the wage gap, we have some interesting sessions about the gender dimensions of industrial relations. We address that in more details, and specifically one last session that we have about artificial intelligence and gender bias. So that's some pretty interesting information to view as a whole. So thank you so much for that, Gustavo. And since we don't have any more questions, I think, Gustavo, you can wrap up, we can conclude, and we can continue tomorrow.
Yeah, this is what I had to say. I would not add anything else, but well, somebody will reach, it's already in the night, somebody will reach the afternoon, the evening, have the rest part today, a very good rest of the day, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Gustavo. And everyone, see you tomorrow. Remember to just prepare in advance to stay a little bit more connected after the end of the session. So we are going to have that conversation that Elton mentioned in the beginning of the session, okay? See you all tomorrow for our last session. Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.